The room went completely silent. I could feel every eye in that conference turning toward me like I was on trial. My boss, Gerald Duke, leaned back in his chair with his arms crossed. He had this smirk on his face that I'll never forget. The kind of smile that says he thought he was about to deliver the punchline of the funniest joke. "Your little side project is pointless," he said, shaking his head like I'd suggested something ridiculous. "Why are you even wasting time on this?" My chest tightened like someone had wrapped a rope around it. I wanted to explode. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shove that quarterly review report across the table and tell him exactly what I thought of him. But my hands froze. My mouth went dry. Anger, humiliation, disbelief, they collided inside me like a storm hitting a house. I was Hazel Brown, and in that moment, I realized something fundamental had shifted. This wasn't just about a rejected idea anymore. This was about my career. This was about my future. And this moment would change everything. I sat there, silent, while Gerald continued talking about quarterly metrics and strategic focus. But I wasn't listening anymore. I was already planning. I walked back to my desk without saying a single word. My fingers were clenched around my bag strap so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My jaw was locked shut like I was afraid something might escape if I opened my mouth. Anger boiled beneath my skin, hot and uncomfortable. I forced myself to breathe slowly. In through my nose. Out through my mouth. But inside, I was screaming. How dare Gerald dismiss months of my work in a single sentence? How dare he mock me in front of the entire leadership team? I pulled my laptop open and stared at the spreadsheet I'd created. The research. The notes. The prototypes. Every single detail, meticulously crafted over the past 4 months. This wasn't just some random idea. This was a solution. A real solution that could change how the company operated. I'd spent countless nights working on it. I'd sacrificed weekends and lunch hours to develop it. And Gerald had laughed at it in front of everyone. That's when I made a silent vow to myself, this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He had no idea what he'd just started. That night, I reviewed everything I had built. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through every email, every prototype, every business case document I'd created. I was documenting my contributions. Not planning retaliation yet. Just survival. I needed proof. I needed evidence that this idea was mine. That I had built it from nothing. But as I reviewed my work, I started noticing something else. Cracks. Weakness in Gerald's position. He didn't understand the technical side of what I'd created. Not really. He relied entirely on me for insight and clarity. He thought charm and confidence could replace actual competence. That was his fatal flaw. Every mistake he made, every time he needed my help to understand something, every moment he had to ask me for clarification, became a potential leverage point. I wasn't building a revenge plan yet. But I was building a map. Understanding the terrain. Finding the weak spots in the fortress where he thought himself protected. Over the next week, I remained professional. I smiled when he walked past my desk. I nodded in meetings. I executed my duties flawlessly, even while seething inside. But something strange started happening. Colleagues began noticing my competence more than his. It happened in small moments. I'd correct an error in his presentation slides before a client meeting. I'd provide clarity in meetings that Gerald couldn't articulate. Partners who needed technical guidance started asking for me specifically instead of asking for Gerald. I became the person people actually trusted. My presence grew quietly indispensable, though Gerald was too arrogant to notice. He thought that humiliating me in a review meeting had buried me. He thought I'd slink back to my desk and accept my place. He didn't realize I was becoming essential to everything he claimed to control. One colleague named Marcus, sensing my frustration, pulled me aside one afternoon. We were standing by the coffee machine in the break room, and he glanced around to make sure no one else was listening. "I've noticed something," he said quietly. "You're the one really keeping these projects alive." Those words hit me differently than I expected. It wasn't loud validation. It wasn't a public acknowledgement. But it was real. It was genuine. It planted seeds in my mind. Marcus trusted me. Other people trusted me too. I wasn't invisible. I was actually indispensable. I began documenting not just my work, but the network of people who depended on it. I created notes about who came to me for guidance, who asked my opinion, who specifically requested me for projects. This network was becoming my greatest asset. I allowed a small error to slip through one of Gerald's reports. Nothing catastrophic. Nothing that would hurt the company significantly. Just a small inconsistency in the numbers. An oversight that only I would normally catch. When the board started asking questions about the discrepancy during a presentation, Gerald panicked. I could see it in his face. The color draining. The sweat forming on his forehead. But I stayed calm. I remained invisible. I watched the first real cracks appear in his perceived control. Leadership wasn't angry exactly. But they were noticing. They were questioning. They were starting to wonder if Gerald actually understood what was happening with his own projects. That single error, allowed to exist, had done more damage to his credibility than 1,000 arguments ever could. Then a meeting video leaked internally. Someone recorded Gerald mocking my project in front of the entire leadership team. The video circulated through the office like wildfire. People watched him ridicule my work. They heard him call it pointless. They saw the contempt on his face. I didn't react outwardly. I maintained my professional demeanor. But inside, I felt fire burning. The betrayal stung. He'd attacked me publicly, and now the entire company could see it. And yet, I smiled in silence. Every eye on me, every whisper in the hallway, every conversation that stopped when I walked past. They wouldn't realize it yet. But this was the turning point. The moment everything shifted. I created a master folder on my personal computer. I labeled it carefully. Inside were emails showing my contributions. Designs I'd created. Meeting notes with timestamps. Prototypes with dates attached. Every proof that this project was mine. Every decision Gerald had taken credit for. I organized everything chronologically. I wanted the timeline to be absolutely clear. This wasn't for revenge yet. This was protection. I couldn't be erased. Not again. Not after working so hard to build something meaningful. The folder grew thicker every day as I added more documentation. By the end of 2 weeks, I had an airtight case showing exactly what I'd built and what Gerald had taken credit for. Through careful networking, I reached out to people I knew in the industry. Not competitors yet. Just contacts. People I'd worked with before. People I trusted. I tested the waters casually. I mentioned my project in passing. I described what it could do. The response was lukewarm at first. But there was interest. There was potential. The seed for my eventual breakthrough was planted. I wasn't actively looking to leave the company. I was just exploring. Testing. Preparing for the moment when staying wouldn't be an option anymore. Gerald noticed the subtle shifts happening around him. Partners were copying me on emails instead of him. Team members started deferring to me for technical guidance. In meetings, people waited for my input before making decisions. He tried to reclaim authority. He'd interrupt me and assert control. He'd make big announcements about strategy changes. But people weren't buying it anymore. They'd seen the video. They understood who was actually doing the work. I didn't confront him about any of it. I let his panic manifest in his tone, his words, his forced attempts at control. Watching him become more desperate and more aggressive actually made my position stronger. Every desperate move he made proved my point. Late nights became my laboratory. I refined the project constantly. I ran tests. I created improved prototypes. I documented everything. While Gerald thought mockery had ended my work, I had a hidden advantage he couldn't touch. Competence. Knowledge. Preparation. Every improvement brought me closer to independence. I wasn't building this project for Gerald anymore. I wasn't building it for the company. I was building it for myself. For my future. And that mindset change made all the difference. I worked with a purpose and passion that had been missing before. I quietly contacted the partners who trusted me most. I didn't criticize Gerald. I didn't badmouth the company. I just provided progress updates. Insights that only I could provide. Clarifications that only I understood. Subtle visibility became my tool. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began bypassing Gerald entirely. They started consulting me directly. When they had questions, they asked me instead of going through the chain of command. The shift was undeniable. I was becoming the face of the project, not Gerald. Rumors of mismanagement and inefficiency began circulating through the office. Investors started noticing inconsistencies in reports. Colleagues began questioning Gerald's decisions. His credibility weakened while mine strengthened. The irony was almost beautiful. He thought belittling me would erase my influence. Instead, he'd done the opposite. Every attack had only proved how much the company depended on me. Every dismissal had only highlighted his incompetence. I couldn't ignore the personal sting of what Gerald had done. Every moment of mockery replayed in my mind. The humiliation. The dismissal. The feeling of being erased in front of everyone who mattered. It hurt. It was real pain. But something shifted inside me. The anger transformed into clarity. I was no longer the hurt underdog sitting in a cubicle nursing a wound. I was the strategist. I was quietly orchestrating my own climb. I was building something he could never take away from me. I pitched a refined version of the project to a small industry partner. Not the company's partner. A separate contact. Someone I knew from before. They were intrigued but cautious. The technology was good, but they wanted proof. Proof that it worked. Proof that it had real-world value. I documented everything meticulously. I ran successful tests. I showed them the results. Meanwhile, Gerald remained completely oblivious. He had no idea what I was doing. No idea that his own employee was developing his competitor while sitting in his office. The dynamics on my team began shifting in visible ways. Team members started confiding in me about their frustrations with Gerald. I listened. I empathized. But I never exploited what they told me. I never used their complaints against him in meetings. Trust became my quiet weapon. Every ally I built reinforced my position. Every person who came to me for guidance instead of Gerald made me stronger. A larger competitor approached me privately. They had heard whispers about the project's potential. Someone had mentioned my name. Someone had said I was the brains behind the innovation. The company reached out through a mutual contact and asked for a confidential demonstration. My heart raced. This was the moment I'd been preparing for without even knowing it. I arranged the meeting carefully. I presented my project. Their interest validated every month of effort. Every night spent working. Every moment of patience and strategy. Just when I thought my plan was unfolding perfectly, Gerald tried to claim the project for himself. He attempted a major presentation. He claimed ownership. He told the board that this innovation was his vision coming to life. But I calmly documented everything. I reinforced the timeline. I presented evidence of my work. The dates. The emails. The prototypes from months ago. His attempt backfired spectacularly. The board looked at him like he was delusional. Partners questioned his integrity. Leadership realized he'd been taking credit for someone else's work. The pressure on Gerald began mounting visibly. Leadership started asking questions directly to me, not to him. They wanted updates. They wanted insights. Every answer I gave further established my authority. Gerald grew visibly anxious. I could see it in how he moved. How his voice shook in meetings. He was trying to regain control over something he never actually had. It was almost painful to watch. Almost. By this point, partners, colleagues, and the board all saw me as the true driver of the project. I subtly introduced solutions and insights that only I could provide. Gerald's attempts to intervene fell flat. People would listen to him politely, then turn to me for the real answer. The shift in authority was complete. And I'd done it all without raising my voice. Without attacking him publicly. Just by being better at what he claimed to do. He cornered me privately one afternoon near the parking garage. Panic filled his voice. "Hazel, you're the only one who can make this work," he said desperately. "Don't ruin it. Please." I nodded politely. I told him I'd do everything I could. I hid the satisfaction building inside me. He didn't realize the board already trusted me completely. He didn't understand that his desperation only confirmed what everyone already knew. The competitor made their formal offer. It came through official channels. A contract worth multiple millions of dollars. My project, mocked just 90 days ago, would now be implemented at a scale I'd only dreamed of. And I would lead the initiative. The moment was electric. Betrayal had transformed into vindication. I held that contract in my hands and felt like I could finally breathe. Leadership formally questioned Gerald's contributions. They reviewed emails. They traced decisions. Evidence proved he had relied entirely on me. He tried making excuses. He tried manipulation. He even tried pleading. But it was too late. The humiliation he felt mirrored exactly what he'd inflicted on me during that review meeting. The smirk was gone from his face. All that remained was the understanding of what he'd lost. I accepted the competitor's offer. It came with a multi-million-dollar contract, a leadership role, and complete authority over the project I'd built from scratch. Every detail. Every relationship. Every innovation was mine. My new title would be Chief Innovation Officer. My new office would be downtown. My new life would be everything I'd worked for. Gerald watched as I walked out of that office building for the last time, confident and respected. The project he'd mocked had become his competitor's biggest advantage. And my life had changed forever. I was Hazel Brown, once dismissed and humiliated, now unstoppable. The moral was undeniable and written in my success: competence, patience, and strategy always triumph over arrogance. I didn't need revenge. I just needed to prove what I already knew about myself. The end, and remember, no one can underestimate you forever. If you loved this comeback, like, share, and subscribe to witness more stories of triumph against the odds.